Good morning, everyone from the West Coast, and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for Early Asset Building in 2026, aligning children's savings accounts, baby bonds, and 530A accounts. We're really glad to be here with you all in community today for a conversation that is both timely and grounded in what we're seeing across the child and family financial well-being field. Early asset building efforts, we know, and we'll talk about more, are expanding in important ways. And with that expansion comes a growing set of opportunities for how we support children and families and how that looks over time. Today's session is about stepping back and looking at how these efforts are taking shape in practice across organizations, systems, and communities nationwide. We're also joined by an incredible group of speakers who bring perspectives from research, policy, and long-standing implementation. We're joined by Emily Bergman from Commonwealth, Madeline Brown from the Urban Institute, and Colleen Quint from the Alphonse Scholarship Foundation. Together, we'll explore what's emerging, what we're seeing across organizations working in child savings, financial capability, and tax time services, and how these efforts come together to continue in a way that's coordinated and meaningful for the families that are impacted. So, very excited to be with you all. Welcome to our session. I'm Sarah Becerra. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Prosperity Now. And in my role, I lead our program strategy across 5 core areas: public policy, applied research, products, network engagement, and capital deployment. The work that we do here is really about connecting insights from research and policy with what's happening in practice so we can better understand what's working, support organizations who are doing that work, and help translate those approaches into something that can scale. I said good morning from the West Coast. I'm based in San Diego, and our team is spread across the country, which allows us to stay closely connected to what's happening in communities and organizations nationwide. To share a little bit more about who we are, Prosperity Now is a national intermediary focused on advancing financial stability and asset building by connecting local organizations, systems, and capital. So we do that in a few different ways. We have a national network of more than 86,000 members with local implementation through trusted networks. We provide capacity building, such as tools, trainings, and guidance, supporting financial management, reporting, and service delivery across the country. We serve as a systems connector, aligning actors across tax, financial institutions, municipalities, and nonprofits, and support as an implementation partner, translating national strategies, some of which we'll talk about today, into practical and local execution. We look at this as a framing of support and a consistent way to approach connection, partnership, and a focus on work that improves outcomes for families and small businesses throughout the country. A little bit more on our focus areas. We are aligned across 5 portfolios: housing and home ownership, entrepreneurship, and small business. You can read a little bit more about each of those areas. What we're here to do today is to talk about child and family financial health, tax opportunity, of which many of you came from our Tax Opportunity Network to join us today, our Child and Family Support Network. Thank you all for being here. And then this last piece of our portfolio and piece of the puzzle is field solutions, really focusing on infrastructure and tool development for those organizations that are directly serving the families and households that most benefit. With a little bit about Prosperity Now, we can jump right into our agenda for today and some context into where our conversation is headed. First, we're going to start with what we're seeing in the field, some of the work that Prosperity Now has been doing in the early asset building space, and some of the insights that we're seeing come out. And then we'll be able to talk more broadly about this and connectedly when we move into our panel on the future of asset building. We're going to spend some time at the end with Q&A, so keep those questions coming in as we go. I'll share a little bit more about how to do that in the next slide. And then at the very end, we'll talk about staying connected to advancements in this work, to real-time insights as they're developing. We'll share a little bit more about what's ahead for Prosperity Now, and I'm sure our other organizations will do the same. And we'll close out with some next steps on how we can stay engaged. With these sessions, it's always helpful to have a few different channels to engage throughout. And so we always share this slide around some session help housekeeping. You should already see that the Q&A is open, ready for you to submit questions at any time. And we'll have a few polls throughout our session, and it'll be great to be able to contribute and share a little bit more about what you're seeing from your vantage point. You can already see that this session is being recorded. So for those that weren't able to join us in real time, we're really glad to have you watching the recording and gaining insights as we go. We'll be sharing this on our Prosperity Action Network. More to come on that a little bit later. And we'll also pause at several points throughout our time together to reflect on questions, see what themes are coming up in our conversation and throughout the session. With that, we are ready for our first poll. I'm going to bring it up to the screen in just a second. And you can take a moment to read through the question on the slide. But this is just to get a quick sense of who's joining us today and how you're engaging in this work. And launch, you should see that now. What early asset building strategies is your organization currently involved in? And involved in may look a lot of different ways. It could be education and awareness. It could be sharing enrollment information, education overall. We've got all of those options. Maybe you're not involved directly, but you have an exploration, an interest. We'll let the responses come in a little bit more, a few more seconds. We'll take a look. All right, we are going to end the poll in 3, 2, and 1. And let's take a look at the results. Elizabeth Pierce messaged us in the chat and said, "You likely noticed baby bonds was not on the poll." Yes, thank you, Elizabeth, right now. And you all noticed that too. So if baby bonds is a part of your work, please share in the chat. Just write baby bonds and we'll capture that insight too. Sorry about that misalignment on the poll. But we have a good amount of us represented on the poll, 46%. Not everyone responded, but those that did, almost half of us are involved in children's savings accounts in some way. Section 530A, new Trump accounts are starting to be implemented and explored. 21% of us there. A third of us are exploring in some form or fashion. So we'll have time to look into questions around that and explore opportunities with the work that you're engaging in right now. And then some of us are curious, not currently involved, but you're curious about this work and how it intersects in the early asset building field. So thank you for your contributions there. We've got one more insight-driven poll before we get started a little bit more into the content of our conversation. And this is around challenges. So many of you are in this work already, touch it in some capacity, or touch financial coaching or counseling. A lot of different intersections, tax time support come in. With regard to your stakeholders, those that you serve, and also with regard to your overarching asset building efforts, what are you seeing as in terms of the biggest challenge? This one is a one option poll. So we're saying the most significant, although we know many of these could be a challenge today. So in just a moment, you'll see that poll launch. And you should see it on your screen now. Lots of answers coming in quickly. Thanks, Loretta. Oh, that's a cool glass cup. Yes, we must stay hydrated throughout our experience today. So make sure you're hydrating. And thank you for the compliment on the cup. We've got almost everyone for our poll. Let me keep it open for another 10 seconds. Okay, I'm gonna close it in 3, 2, and 1. Let's see where we landed for this second check-in on challenges. The biggest challenge you're seeing in early asset building today, the top 2 tied for first, funding or sustainability of these programs, and also its coordination support, I would imagine. And then also family awareness, understanding, or trust. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that Prosperity Now has been doing in terms of understanding how families are feeling about new initiative implementations and existing and the confusion. So the trust is definitely a big piece there, and it's great to see that we're not alone in seeing that as well. We've got, let's see, everything else is kind of split relatively the same. So a little bit of capacity issue around staff, clear guidance is a need, coordination. Yes, great. And then policy. There was a question around how many are answering the poll in the host and panelists chat from Elizabeth. For this poll, we had 60 participants, 72% participation. So it's really great to hear from those that are willing to share and those that are just paying attention as we go to the results. That's great too. So thank you all for sharing a little bit more about what are your barriers? What is the friction looking like for you today? With that, we wanted to talk a little bit about what we are seeing and move into a more broad conversation about the ecosystem and the field at large. A little bit about the work that Prosperity Now has been doing with regard to and been a player in this space in the early asset building space is a little bit of the context that we'll share now before we jump into the panel. Wanted to give a little overarching insight around the current landscape to start. So, across the country, early asset building efforts are expanding. That is what we're seeing. We're seeing more states and cities launch and scale children's savings account programs, including a shift toward statewide models and broader participation. We're also seeing stronger integration into public systems, such as education and state treasuries, which is helping these programs reach more families at scale. At the same time, baby bond proposals are advancing with pilots occurring and early implementation planning taking place and taking shape in multiple communities throughout the country. There's a growing attention from both policymakers and practitioners on how these programs can operate in practice and how they connect to existing systems. You can see that represented in those multiple entry points. And Section 530A Trump accounts are now moving from policy into early implementation. We're hearing a lot of conversation and a lot of collaboration starting around this particular policy and just learning a little bit more about how practitioners are getting ready and getting prepared. Oops, didn't mean to go that far. Here we go. So we wanted to share a little bit more about where these insights are coming from on our end and the cohesion we're looking to create across the field. This is informed by what we're hearing and seeing across our network partners. And you can see in the yellow box a representation of our national research and network engagement. As of today, we've engaged hundreds of organizations across the nonprofit, government, and private sectors through surveys and focus groups. And we're tracking how children's savings accounts programs are operating and evolving across states. We're also hearing directly from families and community-based organizations about how these opportunities are showing up and developing tools and guidance to support these emerging efforts. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that from Prosperity Now in the coming months. And it also connects to this reinforcement of the need for ongoing engagement with organizations working in tax time services, financial capability, and community-based programs. So with this insight overall, our national research, body of research, it helps us get a clearer view of how these efforts are taking practical shape across the country and in different communities and diverse communities at that. I mentioned 530A accounts, and it's been a hot topic, but for those who are newer to this part of the landscape, Section 530A accounts are federally authorized savings accounts for children. You can see a few details on the screen there. They're designed to be seeded with an initial public contribution with the opportunity for additional contributions over time. They are intended to support long-term asset building goals. So really the idea is exactly what we're all here for, to strengthen family financial well-being. And these funds are designed for implementation alongside other efforts already underway. And they're coming into this extensive ecosystem. And so it really makes sense to be talking now about how they connect and why it's especially timely and important today. A few final thoughts on our field insights around what's happening and what we're seeing, how this shows up in practice, is that organizations are building on existing infrastructures, identifying these natural entry points to connect families to these opportunities. And at the same time, families are encountering multiple programs across different systems and at different points in time, which creates more opportunities to build assets. And it also introduces some complexity. This makes a clear opportunity for us all and why we're gathered and having this conversation today, a clear opportunity to strengthen alignment, shared understanding across the sector, and practical guidance so that these efforts connect and function together effectively, helping us make informed decisions and having families have that clear information just in time. With that little bit of context setting, we are going to shift into our panel conversation. And this discussion is focused on how early asset building efforts are evolving across policy, practice, and coordination, and also what it will take for these systems to work effectively for children and families. The way we'll move through our conversation is I'll invite each panelist up to share their perspective along the way. I wanted to start by giving each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. We are joined today by Emily Bergman, who is the Associate Director for Commonwealth, as well as Madeline Brown, Policy Associate for Urban Institute. And very shortly, we will be joined by Colleen Quint, President and CEO of the Alphon Scholarship Foundation. She will be in joining us soon. We will get started and join her when she gets here. But thank you, Emily and Madeline, for joining us today. Emily, would you mind going first and sharing a little bit about yourself, your organization, and how your work connects to early asset building for children and families?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name's Emily Bergman, and I'm an associate director at Commonwealth. Commonwealth is a national nonprofit building financial security and opportunity for people living on low and moderate incomes through innovation and partnerships. So, our mission is to make it possible for all people to build wealth. Our approach to systems change requires building evidence, implementing solutions, influencing policy, and driving and inform and influence practices. So I lead teams that research and design innovative tools and products to support wealth building opportunities for low and moderate income earners. And I'm currently working on a project at Commonwealth researching the perceptions and barriers that families earning low and moderate incomes might have regarding the new 530A accounts so that we can work on creating messaging for organizations that have those touch points with those who qualify for that $1,000 seed so that families can decide for themselves if the accounts are right for them.
Thank you, Emily. We're so glad to have you here. Thank you for that additional background and oversight of the work that you're doing now and how it connects, and really excited to have this conversation with you. We'll move over to you, Madeline, to share a little bit about your work.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be here. My name is Madeline Brown. I'm a senior policy associate at the Urban Institute, where I work doing research translation on wealth building policies, a little bit of income too, and tax as it overlaps. But in the last 5 years have been focused on early wealth building. So that includes all of the things that you just talked about. And really, we at Urban think about sort of our approach in a couple ways. One is as a sort of traditional producer of research. That's sort of our role often in the field. So we do have several evaluations of pilots and programs that are ongoing. We've also been doing some modeling and some qualitative work with young adults on both perceptions and also sort of barriers to wealth building. So we did a national baby bond study on modeling the impact of the 2018 American Opportunity Accounts Act and are now working on a complementary piece for the 530As. And then I think the other half of my job is really trying to bring that research out to inform policy and practice. So joining conversations like this, testifying, providing comments, working with all levels of government and practitioners and policymakers to make sure that the research that we do have is informing policy design on the ground.
Thank you, Madeline. So great to have you here too and bringing in all of those perspectives to this conversation. We're going to start with an opening question for both of you, and either can jump in first. Just thinking about the field as a whole, what feels really important from what you're seeing for practitioners to understand in this moment?
Sure. I'm happy to just throw my 2 cents in. I think one of the things that I've been talking about with practitioners a lot in the last year, especially, um, is that this is really a field that's existed for some time now, right? We're in our fourth decade actually of these programs, and I think because of all the recent attention on 530As, that's been a little bit muddled. And I think because of that, when we really start looking at child development accounts starting in the 1990s and this sort of idea that low-income people also need to have some assets, that we can't just have wealth be something for high-income people. We will never see full financial security if that's the case. Um, we're able to sort of look at the whole body of literature, I think, in a much more sort of systematic and hopefully informative way to the various pilots and programs that are going on now. So I think, my encouragement for practitioners is like, it would be hard to find a design choice in an early wealth building pilot that hasn't already been studied or looked at in some way. Now, of course, the sort of strength of that evidence is going to vary, right? You've got a lot of studies that have gone on with small scale, small population, and so you have to be mindful about, how generalizable these things are. But I think as the 530As rolled out, certainly as the other pieces of federal legislation rolled out, many of us in the field from the child development account, baby bond space, 529 space have really come together to say, like, here are sort of these core principles, right, that any of these programs should have if the goal is really to expand wealth building opportunity to low income people. That may not be everybody's goal, right? Some people's goal might be improve college outcomes for certain schools or certain zip codes. Like, so I think being really clear about sort of like what is your program's goal? Who is your target population? What is it that you hope that they can do that they can't do now? And then coming back to folks like Emily and I and sort of saying like, okay, these are the things that we're weighing, these are the goals that we have, like what do we know about design? Because a lot of the sort of best practices around, enrollment strategies, investment strategies, who's holding the money, who's outreaching to families, who's doing all these things, we actually have really good models for. And so I always just like to sort of remind folks that we have lots of wonderful, like rich work on these programs. And though there are certainly lots to learn, I think right now there is definitely this momentum, but I always like, as a sort of researcher, to ground it in this deep history that we have, thanks to Colleen and a lot of other folks too.
Thank you. I love how you framed those questions around the goal. Certainly, what is it that that this will enable that they can't do now? And so we're keeping that center in the planning, and then who's done this framing before? Let's go find that information, because to your point, there is so much work that has been done already, and it's more about just connecting to the people that have that information and being able to leverage and scale. So I appreciate that framing, Madeline, and looking forward to Emily, your response. I'll pass it to you next.
Yeah, Madeline, that a lot of fantastic points there. And at Commonwealth, we've also been talking about looking at the landscape holistically. However, right now I am focused on 530A accounts, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about those. Like I said before, we're working on understanding the perceptions and barriers around the new 530A accounts, specifically with those whose babies qualify for that $1,000 seed opportunity. The reason we're so focused on this is because of the timeline. We're in the thick of things. We're getting close to the end of tax season, and these accounts are opt-in. They're not opt-out, and families can sign up when they file their taxes, or later on through the portal. The portal is open now. Families earning low to moderate incomes could miss out on the chance at that $1,000 seed due to not having access to a CPA or a financial advisor, like many higher earning families might. And so every family should be made aware of the $1,000 seed opportunity so that they can make a decision about whether or not these accounts are right for them and their child. But we see a lot of opportunity for supply side actors as well, including workplace, tax preparers, community organizations, to support and expand this new asset building opportunity through matches and through communicating about 530A accounts. We also see this as a way for families to feel ownership. Commonwealth has done a lot of research around investor identity or this idea that investing is for me. These accounts with the $1,000 seed fund could support families who want to build wealth through investment participation, start to see themselves as investors. And that's for both the parents and the children who will grow up knowing that these accounts are theirs. So we are pretty excited about these accounts, even though they are so new and that $1,000 seed.
Thanks for that perspective, Emily. You're giving optimism, giving excitement and connection to, well, as Madeline did too, as it connects to how we're thinking about this, how we're framing the messaging. And that's what I loved about our previous conversation that we had before this panel is just thinking about what's really going to resonate. And that identity piece is so important and so integral to how we shape it, how we talk about it, and how we align to the communities that will benefit most. And hi, Colleen.
Hey, everybody.
Oh, it's so great to have you here.
My goodness, it's been about 45 minutes of trying to get in. I'm so, so sorry it's taking me so long, but I'm delighted to be here and thanks for your patience. I apologize. I don't know. I don't know why the Zoom gods didn't like me today, but they didn't. But I'm here
Thank you
now.
for
So
your resilience and not giving up. You are actually
absolutely. We Mainers are a hardy group, so.
Yes, exactly. And that is what we need. And this is a great time for you to come in and do a brief little introduction on, and let me pull up, I'll pull up our slide before here too, to just share a little bit about your organization and how your work connects to early asset building, because right after that, we'll jump to your question, Colleen.
Fantastic. That's great. Great to be here. And again, great to see you both, Madeline and Emily, as well. So I'm here in the great state of Maine. I run the Alphonse Scholarship Foundation, which is the state's CSA program. So we invest $500 at birth for every Maine baby for their future education after high school. And I could talk just about that for about 3 hours, but I will, since we've used a lot of time here already, why don't we switch to the questions you got for me?
Great. Let me jump over. Here we go. So what we really can glean and gain from you, Colleen, is this extensive work background, more than a decade of operating one of the country's most established CSA programs. As you think about
Mhm.
this question and the future, because we're looking at the evolution of these programs and the field as a whole, what do you see as some significant lessons that policymakers, practitioners should keep in mind as they're engaging in these efforts?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are, I would say, several that come to mind right off the top of my head. One is that, and I'm sure that Madeline and Emily have already spoken to this, but from our program's perspective, and I think that of most others in the field, is that automatic enrollment from a policy standpoint is, and when I say policy, by the way, those are not just policy makers, i.e., people who hold legislative office, right? But within the program level, we're setting policy for our program every time we make a decision about eligibility for the program, kind of how it's supposed to work, who we work with, all those things. Those are all policy decisions as far as I'm concerned. So certainly the automatic enrollment is the key. You really want to get every child into the program from the beginning, because that then gives you an 18-year platform to work with those kids and families to activate and engage them to make sure that they're aware of the grant. So that's really the key. Very closely related to that, I would say, is the importance of partnerships, right? So here in Maine, we've got 176,000 kids with an Alphond grant, and there are 2.5 of us on staff. So as you can imagine, it's not a super high touch model. But we still really manage to reach a lot of families. And we do that, through direct mail and social media and digital media and all those things. But our partners are super important. And these are folks who are on the ground working with families every day. And, as again, I'm so sorry I wasn't here for earlier parts of the conversation, so I don't know what's already been touched on. But trust is at a premium at the moment, right? This is a moment in our country where there's a lot of, if not distrust, at least mistrust. And people really aren't sure what's going on with something, or they don't know whether somebody who says they're acting in their best interest is actually acting in their best interest. And that covers all sides. That's not a political statement and from a perspective of left or right. That's just kind of how everybody is experiencing the world today. So partnerships are really important because those trusted partners here in Maine, we work with hospitals and with Head Start programs, with libraries and all kinds of organizations that are, again, directly working with families, that families know the human that they're interacting with already. And when they hear about a program like ours from someone that they know and trust, and they have experience to tell them they really do have their family's best interest in mind, that's really important. And so I think that for policymakers and practitioners alike, as efforts expand and new things, new opportunities come online, I think that those partnerships are really super important. So I'll stop with that. Well, can I say one other thing really quickly?
You may.
So the one other thing that I would say really quickly is that, and this goes along with the awareness and engagement piece, right? Maybe somebody already touched on this, but there is really fantastic and compelling social science research that shows the impact that these kinds of early investments can make, right? So, stronger developmental gains for kids, higher aspirations, lower maternal depression, all those kinds of things. These programs, whatever they are, whether it's a CSA or a baby bond or a 530A account, can only have those positive impacts if families know that they have the grant. And so that awareness piece really, really matters. And that then leads to the importance of the partnership and communication, and getting everybody in from the beginning so you have the opportunity to build that 18-year platform for communication. So now I'll actually stop.
Thank you for that additional connection to, well, Madeline was talking about all of the research that's been done and all of the
Mhm.
benefits that have come out of these programs when they are accessible, when they are known
Yeah,
and people know how to access them, and then that trust piece being such a
yeah.
big pillar of making that successful. So appreciate all of that framing, including the automatic enrollment and how it's worked so well in Maine to be able to design the program that way.
Yeah.
Thanks, Colleen. Jumped right in.
Yep. I'm
Cool.
usually,
Cool is a
that's usually
cute
not the
word.
problem. It was just getting in to begin with was the issue today. So,
Sarah, if I could just add on the policymakers piece, I do think
Please.
to the point that I was making earlier about sort of folks being clear about sort of who their target population is, what it is that they hope is going to happen. The reason for doing that is not just so you have like a sound theory of change, right? It's because like it actually should inform your design and the delivery of your program. So a program that's targeting mothers, right, low-income mothers who have babies versus a program that's targeting 16 to 18-year-olds
mhm.
is going to look very different. In terms of how you're going to reach those, where are you going to reach your families, right? And school age population is another target population we hear of a lot in this space. Every kindergartner, you're going to reach those families in different places than you are mothers who just had a baby and teenagers, right? And so for every choice that you're making around outreach, communication, engagement, matching up and being really realistic about who your target population is, and then their financial realities too, right? If you're running a
Mhm.
program that's relying on family savings and you've got, by definition, a low income eligibility criteria and folks that you know don't have a lot of liquid savings, you're going to need to be thoughtful about what is the liquidity of the account that you're asking them to put money into, right? What happens if they come across an emergency? Do they have other ways to be able to cover that in addition to sort of asset limits and these other interactions? So just because this panel is, talking about sort of how these things all come together, I think like being really clear about the ways in which whatever you're running is going to sort of land in people's real lives, right? Meaning like where are they going to receive information? How are these dollars going to add on to other programs that they already have? Do they qualify for benefits? Do you need to be thinking about asset limits? All of those things are so important. And just I think all speak to the real value of really knowing and understanding who it is that you're trying to serve. So even when we push for sort of automatic and universal enrollment, I still think it's very important to be mindful about sort of what the goal is overall of the program.
Yes, I will say I'm very glad we'll have a transcript of this session and you hit so many things in such a short period of time, Madeline. I think it's going to be so useful for people to have that as well across all three of you, being able to circle back on some of these really impactful ideas. And it's making me want to change the conversation to a little bit more of a focus on institutional infrastructure. And this question is for you, Madeline, so you could just keep talking and add anything else that you'd like to this question around considerations. And you were just talking about design. And so as you think about systems design, user-centered design, what are some of the things that you've seen work in practice and some of the frameworks that Urban Institute uses around this effort?
Sure. So, about 3 years ago now, as we sort of had seen the baby bonds bill come up, we were envisioning future pieces of federal legislation. We brought a group of folks together from across these spaces, and sort of said, all right, what are our principles, right? If we had to pick like 6 design principles for these programs, and again, specifically, if your goal is to build wealth among low-income people, how should you be designing these programs? So automatic and universal enrollment, right? Making meaningful initial contributions, thinking about progressivity, right? Being mindful about who's going to have the ability to save and who's not, and not penalizing those who are not going to have their own ability to save. Thinking about vertical integration. So any federal program needs to be thinking about how it interacts with state and local programs, designing for asset limits. So I think, again, a lot of this comes back to what do we understand about people's day-to-day lives, people's financial realities. We have a dashboard at Urban that looks at a whole host of different financial health metrics, one of which is emergency savings, right? So a quarter of people in the United States, families, don't have $2,000 in emergency savings at all. So if we start with that reality and we assume, right, that one of our goals also has to be people, being able to pay for an unexpected medical bill. Maybe you're uninsured, your kid breaks their arm, maybe your tire just blows or your transmission goes, right? Like we've all had these things that come up that you were not expecting. And a lot of families just can't make those payments. And so they turn to, either pulling out savings that they have or other ways of financing things where they're often taking on, bad rates to be able to finance things. So I think making sure that we are collaborative as a field is really important. I think one of the things that I've seen in this space, even in the last 5 years, is like the cash and the wealth fields coming together a little bit with the understanding of we have to be helping families do both, right? We have to be helping families both meet their basic needs and save for the future and save for their kids. But I think that also applies to the ways in which our programs all consider asset limits, right? I don't think anybody in this field who wants people to be penalized for saving, for building wealth. We don't want to put people's benefits at risk. We don't want to put people's employment at risk, any of that. So, again, like being super, super intentional about everything we can understand about families and the kinds of expenses that are occurring. And we've seen this pop up in some of the pilots, and I think Colleen can probably speak to this too, but locally in Maryland, right, there's a baby bonds pilot with 2 kindergarten classes in Montgomery County. It is a wealth building pilot. This is with the goal of giving these kids a real college future. One thing that they did about a year into the pilot was essentially create a slush fund for families to sort of apply to, although the application is essentially just an ask. And that is for when things come up, right? When other things come up that they need to be able to cover for their kids, sometimes school-based, sometimes not. And, they've just found that families really only ask when they need it. They've never had an overrun problem. It's not a huge sum of money, but it is there for emergencies. And also, for the field trip that comes up that the parent can't pay for and they don't want their kid to have to sit out on. Like these, life is can be expensive. And so I think we've seen the pilots really evolve to try to meet sort of this holistic set of needs and build people's financial health. And I think slowly we're starting to see some of the policies at the state and federal level reflect that reality too.
Thanks, Madeline. Emily, Colleen, anything to add?
Yeah,
Um,
Madeline, I think, oh, Colleen, do you want to go ahead?
no, you go right ahead, Emily.
That all valid, such valid points. And especially when talking about these 530A accounts, because again, they are so new. And we are sharing about them and talking to families about them before we know all of the design components, which can be very complicated. So other pieces of the design that we see as extremely important includes clear usage parameters, fully understanding the tax implications and asset calculations of the accounts, making it easy to access the accounts once opened, including making them easy to find once the child becomes of age. Of course, we know that sometimes these accounts can get lost because it's many, many years in the future, and we just want to make sure that that is a component that people are thinking about. And then back to that piece of general awareness and messaging of the accounts. As many people have already talked about, it is opt-in, it is not opt-out, it is not automatic enrollment. And as we've seen with 529 accounts, the stat I have here is 73% of families who don't have a 529 plan have never heard of 529 plans. And so these communication channels are so important. And specifically with these 530A accounts, we want to make sure that families are aware of this $1,000 seed because they're entitled to it if they want it.
Yeah, those are great points, Emily and Madeline both. And I think the only piece that I would add, and you both touched on it briefly, is just to, and these are all kind of policy decisions made at the macro level and kind of big institutions involved. But ultimately, the families have to, as we've all been talking about, need to know that they have the account, and then they need to be able to navigate to be able to find it. And I think that's a piece that's going to be increasingly difficult, which is why that early start and then the full 18 years to not only to kind of connect with the families, but to keep them engaged so they don't set up an account or check a box, when the child is 8 months old and then move 3 times and forget that it's even out there, right? And I think there are a lot of ways that that can be done, and I think there's some work heading in that direction. But if families don't know that they have it, or they know they have it but they can't find it, then that's going to be problematic. And none of these programs, CSAs, baby bonds, or 530A accounts, will ever reach their potential and their promise if families don't engage with them the way that we hope that they will.
Thank you, all three of you, for talking a little bit about design in very practical, tactical ways. And it leads to, we've got two more questions. This one is for you, Emily, to really expand on what you've already started talking about with regard to the work you've been doing as an organization around 530A accounts, the conversations around messaging and outreach, and how do we talk about and what are you learning so far? I would love to hear, and I know that work is still very much underway. I would love to hear a little bit about what you're seeing so far.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So, as you said, we're very early in our research. So these are very, very early findings, some sneak peeks. We did run a survey for parents whose babies qualify for that $1,000 seed funding. So to be clear, that $1,000 is for babies born between 2025 and 2028. So essentially just babies born last year and the next couple of months were those who participated in this survey. So those who participated in the survey did indicate that most eligible parents earning low and moderate incomes were aware of the introduction of 530A accounts this year, which we found exciting that there was awareness around it. And then 90% of those parents who were aware were also aware of the $1,000 match and opportunity to enroll through their tax filing. We did look at barriers. So some of the top barriers to opening an account were cited as not knowing how to open it, and then also believing it would be too complicated. However, the majority did intend to open these accounts. So again, some more optimism there. We also found that despite the name 530A accounts, they're also known as Trump accounts. Parents across the board are seemingly still interested in that $1,000 seed. Again, we'll see how this plays out. This is all very early days. On the other side of things, we've also had conversations with over 20 experts and organizations who have regular touch points with parents earning low to moderate incomes over the last, I would say, 6 weeks or so. So again, hot off the press. The main questions we're hearing from organizations include concerns around branding. As I said before, they're also called Trump accounts. The portal is on the website trumpaccounts.gov. Concern around trust in the government, confusion around what the accounts can and can't do, and why they might be beneficial over another account. And our take is that there's $1,000 on the table for these babies and more seed funding from philanthropic organizations for older children. And we don't want low and moderate income earning families to miss out on this money that could help them build wealth for their future. So we're working to design some of these answers and talking points for these questions that a lot of these organizations have.
Amazing. Thank you, Emily. Looking forward to what comes out of this big initiative and staying partnered and all of us as the practitioners on the call being able to access those insights and leverage them in their communities is incredible. So thank you for sharing a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Sarah.
Colleen, come on in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit and build on what Emily said. So, some of us, those of us running CSA programs or other early wealth building programs in different communities around the country, a number of us have been talking, obviously, about the new kid on the block, the 530A accounts, and it can be a great thing, but it also adds confusion to families who are already overloaded, and it puts organizations like ours, like, how do we explain this is new and different, but doesn't replace what we're already doing with the Alphon grant, right? So there's all these things to try to navigate. So, like, here in Maine, I'm doing a small thing where I'm writing a blog that's going to go out to families and caregivers to say, here in Maine, we love the Alphon grant. And guess what? There's a new resource. We want to make sure that you know about it. It's not the same thing. It's can use for, different purposes, et cetera. And we like touch on the different tax treatments, but that gets so complicated so fast that like we don't want to take responsibility for getting all of that detail in a way that parents need to understand. So there'll be other resources for that. But I guess the main point that I'm trying to make is I think that there's an opportunity for those of us in the space that are working with families to make sure that there is an awareness. So to Emily's point, they don't leave that money behind because the families who are working with financial advisors, their financial advisors are going to be like, hey, fill out this form, check this box, make sure you get your $1,000. Them who are filling out taxes on their own, not filling it out, maybe working with Vita sites, which are a great opportunity, by the way, to work with Vita sites or other kinds of entities like that are working with families as they file their taxes. Maybe they want to make it get it filed early to get EITC and that kind of thing. There's a lot of great opportunities for partnership, back to my point earlier on the call, between CSA programs and the entities they're already working with to raise visibility and awareness of this as another resource for families should they be interested in it.
Just to add and to respond to Courtney's question in the chat, and Emily, Colleen, welcome your takes on this. My current read is that a business use is not currently outlined as one of the eligible expenses at 18 according to IRA rules, which means that explicitly taking the money and using it to start a business would incur both an income tax rate plus a 10% tax rate. Now, as Colleen has mentioned, the tax system is very complicated, so I imagine there are probably workarounds that people might be discussing around what if you, the parent, are a business owner and you put money into your child's Trump account via that and think about hiring your child at 18. Like there may be sort of some of those kinds of loopholes that are being discussed, and I can't speak to them. I'm not either a tax expert or certainly not a tax attorney. But just to be super clear about what is currently in writing, it is following IRA rules, which means that higher education, home purchase, and birth of a first child are the only sort of explicit uses that would not incur that 10% rate. But Emily, Colleen, if your interpretation is different, please jump in.
No, it's not different. The only slight nuance I would add is that there's also different tax treatments, as I understand it, depending on who has made the contribution to the account. So you're talking about tax uses kind of when you take it out, or you approved uses when you take it out. But if even if you're using it for an approved use, there are still the potential tax differences depending on where the initial money came from. So it gets really complicated really fast for sure. And it's all still being worked out, right? So these are just like information we have as of 2 o'clock today, which could be different as of 2 o'clock tomorrow because a lot of the regs are still being developed.
Thank you both. Whew. And thank you, Courtney, for the question around using 530A accounts to start a business and what the potential tax can be. So that was framed for everyone in the chat. So for those watching the recording, there's a little context for you. And also, Colleen, you were talking a little bit about the essential partners and efforts that need to coordinate in order for this to be as effective as possible. So I've got this final question for us on the screen around that, and you've all mentioned this in a few different ways, but in terms of final thoughts, as we're thinking about national coordination and community coordination, what does that look like from each of your vantage points?
So I'll just repeat again, we see that huge opportunity for tax preparers, financial services, nonprofits, community organizations, government, and employers to ensure that families are aware of the $1,000 seed and that they're aware of 530A accounts and of course all of the accounts within this landscape, just as Madeline and Colleen have already noted and I've already talked about too. But I want to focus a little bit on employers for this question. Employers could play a significant role in helping make these accounts a wealth building tool for families earning low and moderate incomes. And our research does speak to that. Commonwealth's earlier research shows that workers do look to their employers to support their financial needs. They can increase awareness of and lower barriers to accessing these child savings accounts. Many employers have already announced that they would be adding matches or seed funding to their employees' accounts. But we need to, of course, ensure that first families open the accounts to get that employer match on top of the government match. And then there's also some other philanthropic seed funding that has been committed to. And second, we also need to ensure that employers with lower income workers are also making these offerings to their employees and that it's not just high income workplaces that are offering this as a benefit.
My things that are top of mind for me in terms of collaboration, I just think continuing to push us all to remain very collaborative and also stay as much as we can up to date on all these different accounts. I really think we owe it to families, especially as we think about bringing in other entities like VitaSites, to be informing families of all of these, right, how this whole ecosystem comes together to support them. I think what we have learned is that there is not going to be one account that solves everybody's problems, nor maybe should there be. And so I think what that does mean is that the more educated that we can all be on sort of the relative benefits and trade-offs and where certain dollars should go and where they shouldn't, and I mean we as like a very broad field here, I think that will only benefit families as they themselves try to make sense of this mess. And I think the only other group that I would say we need to sort of think about is I do think, especially in the early wealth building space, where we're talking about really large sums going to people in some cases at 18, thinking about building credit, really understanding credit and debt, like sort of financial capability concepts that I think go be above and beyond what your sort of typical financial education, even in high school, might cover. And really helping people navigate those kinds of concepts and thinking about like, where are we going to be delivering that information? Who's delivering it? What are some of the workforce? As we have a national program now, like how do we need to be prepping to be able to be sort of delivering what I think of as like, asset-based financial capability concepts at scale? To me, that's a different question than the one we've had up until now, where we haven't had such a sort of scale. So just naming, I would sort of emphasize continuing to educate ourselves and work together, and thinking about some of those credit building type concepts as being part of our education ecosystem.
Yeah, and let me just, if I could, build on comments from both Madeline and Emily here to say. So you might have seen me chuckle when you talked about the one account. I think Jason Ewes talked about one account to rule them all. Drawing from the Lord of the Rings. But that's not going to be the case. And as much as we'd like to talk about alignment, it's really for families in particular. It's really more like a Venn diagram with a lot of intersecting circles. And something at the center that can really add up to a lot from all the different resources, but they're still kind of in individual separate accounts. And so that is going to be complicated. So I think anything that we can do, kind of at the program, institutional, and policy level to make sure that families have good, simple, clear information about what kinds of accounts they're eligible for, how they can be used. It's a lot to wade through, and families are busy and they have a lot of stressors in their lives. And while these are all intended as good things, the the accumulation of information that families need to absorb and navigate is a lot to ask of them. And so I think the onus is on us collectively across all of our kind of fields and perspectives in the seats that we hold, to find ways to make that easy for families so the kids actually do use and make use of those early investments and those assets that they have. And then, I think Madeline's last point there is especially important. And when I've talked before about the 18-year platform, that's what I'm speaking to, right? Is 18 years to have students not only know that they have this resource or these resources, but what it means, how they can use it, where they can use it, how it grows over time, how do markets work, how, credit, debt, student loans, mortgages, all those kinds of things. And I think there is a great opportunity, again, despite all the challenges, a great opportunity to work across these different organizations, institutions, and sectors to provide that information in a coordinated way, so that if, most states have different kinds of learning standards for students. And so if there really is a national platform for these 530A accounts. I mean, there is, not if there is, obviously. And then individual states have their own CSA and or bond programs at the state level, at the local level, at the county level, at the city level, at the school level, whatever they may be. How can we get that information to families so they can see it all in one place, so that they can know that, oh, I'm a kid who was born in this state, my parent works for X company, all those kinds of things, so that they're then able to know what's available to them, in a way that they can make meaning of, and then have a foundation around financial capability so that that asset can be used to actually help them move forward in their life with whatever choices they make, including to save it towards their retirement. Because you guys know the data around retirement savings better than I do, but it's not any better than the emergency savings is, for many households. And so it's a lot of wonderful opportunity here, and I think it's important that we work together to make sure that it really reaches its full promise.
What a good note to end us on. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Emily. And thank you, Madeline, for being a part of and contributing so much to this conversation. I want to close this out because we're at time, but I will answer our two questions in the Q&A section around will the slides be provided after the webinar? Yes. So as long as you're registered, you'll receive the recording, the slides, and all of the links and resources that we've shared on this webinar. The second question was around the CSA, Children's Savings Accounts National Field details on our website, on Prosperity Now's website. We are continuing our annual State of the Field Children's Savings Accounts work, and as part of that have asked program managers to opt in to being included on that national list. So it is a work in progress, Chelsea. Thank you for bringing it up, that it was a really helpful resource, and it's one that we definitely want to bring back. As we close out our time together today, we wanted to share a few ways to stay connected. Thank you if you're still on, and if you're not, we'll make sure to share this after. But Prosperity Action Network is our hub, our community hub, to share resources, practical tools, work that comes out of these conversations, and subsequent toolkits and messaging that is being prepared by across the board, and ways that we can all information share is what happens on the network. So we're going to share a link to that as well as in our follow-up communications. We've also got a campaign that we'd love to share your stories of prosperity. We'll share more information on that, but we'd love to hear from you. And a few more details on that will be coming your way. And what comes next, staying connected, you'll get, like I said, a recording of today's session, access links and key resources, and a link to stay connected through our platform. Thank you again, Emily, Colleen, Madeline, everyone who joined us today for being a part of this really rich and timely conversation. We look forward to having you join future convenings, future ways of engaging and continuing this conversation because it really is an important one. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.